But we are going to move on this week, and we're going to analyze how our draft class looks thus far. So just to bring you guys through again, through our draft class again, we drafted Chop Robinson, defensive end in the first round. Then we have Jalen. We have Patrick Paul, who drafted in the second round. Jalen Wright was a fourth round pick. We traded a third round pick for him. And then we have Malik Washington, Mohamed Kamara, Patrick Morris, Taj Washington. So I just took you guys through our draft picks. Josh, I'm going to start off with you. What do you think about this draft class?
I think there are two very bright spots. I think there's one and I think there's a bunch of I know you guys are going to roll your eyes. I think there's a bunch of incompletes, right? Yeah. I think the bright spots are clearly Jalen Wright. I think he's this season's for us. This season's Devon Achane, right? I think he's not getting the volume, right? So the yards and the production isn't there, but I think he's a stud. I really do. I've loved him since Tennessee. I was banging on the table to draft him in the second round, let alone getting him in the fourth. I'm happy with fine. Give up a third. We have a couple third compensatory picks coming our way. Fine. See you later. Patrick Paul, I think in the short amount of time, 62 offensive snaps, like I said earlier, 0 penalties, 1 sack allowed, right? Okay, that's outstanding for one of the hardest positions in football, the left tackle position, right? Not to mention the fact that he's blocking for 62 snaps for 4 different quarterbacks, right? I think and each one of them have a different drop back, have a different processing, pattern, have a different time to release, and all of that factors into how good or where, how far, how deep your left tackle, your right tackle drops, what their steps look like, and so on, what their drop steps look like, and so on and so forth. And I think he's been outstanding, right? Chop Robertson is the right now. Okay, cool. You're on the field. Good for you. 5 games, 3 solo tackles, 4 assists, 7 total tackles, 1 tackle for loss, no sacks, right? Not what you want to see from your first round pick. Malik Washington, whatever. Okay. Like, I think he needs to come back, right? He needs to get into the swing of things, and maybe we'll start seeing a little more. And I'm shocked personally. I'm a huge fan of Mo Kamara. I am a massive fan. I think he's actually a better pass rusher now than Chop Robinson is. I'm surprised he has gotten 0 snaps, I think, in the regular season. I could very well be wrong with that, but I couldn't find any stats on him, so I'm assuming he hasn't played.
I haven't seen him out there.
Yeah, and then Patrick Morris and Taj Washington are IR and A's. So, it's kind of a meh draft class with 1 potential star, 1 potential starter, and 1 potential rotational defensive end.
Anthony, what do you think?
Yeah, I really, as many of you know, if you watch the show, my bold prediction is that Chop Robinson was going to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. It doesn't look so good through 5 weeks here. Listen, watching him is really exciting. He's so fast, right? Like, he's so explosive off the line, but he just doesn't have the finesse yet, right? Like, I think they call those players raw, right? They're a raw talent. He has the size, the strength, the speed, but he just doesn't know how to put it together to actually disrupt a play yet. And I'm really hopeful that he'll find it, but we tend to draft defensive ends that take forever to actually find their way. Jalen Phillips was one of them. Deion Jordan never found his way.
You shall not be named.
Right.
Charles
So
Harris.
It does really surprise me that Mo Kamara hasn't found his way on the field, especially considering we signed Tyus Bowser 2 days before the game and he played. It's it makes no sense. So maybe he's dealing with an injury or something like that. I don't know. Jalen Wright, everything you guys told me he would be. I don't watch college football. I knew nothing about this guy, but Josh and you guys were talking him up, and he is awesome. So the running back position is going to be really fine with Achane and Wright for a while.
God, could you think about that, fellas? If we can keep we're set for the foreseeable. That's crazy.
Yeah,
it's nuts. It's really well well worth trading up for him. I think we're gonna probably miss that 3rd round pick this year when we when we get to the draft. But listen,
Well, don't forget we have two 3rd round compensation picks that we get, so we'll have 2 3rd round picks this year.
Well,
Okay.
maybe.
No, for sure, because of the contracts that were given out to.
Okay.
They were over 100 million each. One to Christian
it's
Wilkins
based on
and
the
one to Robert
contracts
Hunt.
given to the
Okay.
Yep.
I know
So-
Christian Wilkins is hurt right now.
Yeah, it's not
Which,
based on.
by the way, I hate to see that because Christian Wilkins is one of my favorite Dolphins when he was here.
Yeah, that was tough.
And he's always been, kind of a model of consistency. He hardly ever missed a game, and it sucks to see him go to Las Vegas and have to go on IR. All right, so Steve, what are your thoughts on this draft class?
Honestly, I don't understand why Malik Washington hasn't got his go yet. I am probably a little bit more. I haven't really expressed it as much, but I'm probably a little bit more excited to see what he can do in a slot receiver position. Jalen Wright would be a rookie of the year if he was on a team like the San Francisco 49ers. So we got a steal in the 3rd round with him. And Chop Robinson is exactly what I thought he was going to be. A player with not enough film, not enough experience in college, only really went off against bad teams like Maryland. He just I guess he has the size. He looks good in the combine. He looks good in the weight room. He looks good on the track. But when you put the pads on and turn the lights on and get the fans in the seats and all that, you put a guy in front of him that's the same size as him or a little bit bigger, which most of these offensive linemen are going to be. He doesn't impress anybody. So I said it from the beginning that I don't think we should have wasted a 1st round pick on him. I was kind of hoping we would have went with an offensive line or, I would honestly have to go back and look at the draft class to tell you what I wanted because I can't really remember it at this point in my time, but I do remember being upset that it was Chop Robinson. With that being said, I am a lot more optimistic about the rest of our rookies. I really like, Patrick Paul. I think he's going to be the next stud offensive lineman, and hopefully we don't trade him. I know we got a lot from Laramie Tunsil, but I don't want to see that with Patrick Paul. I don't care how much you can get for him. Let's keep a stud lineman and just, let other teams wish they had him rather than giving him up for, X, Y, Z and this person, that person. Like
He is a mountain of a human.
Yeah, keep him. I would have been okay with keeping Laramie Tunsil. Granted, we wouldn't have what we have today, and 5 of these elite players that we ended up getting. But it's time to keep this one. And it wouldn't be surprised me if they, somebody offered the kitchen sink for a guy like Patrick Paul, and Chris Greer's ears go up like an idiot, and now we're sending another guy away to hopefully get, in his eyes, things to help build Miami back up to a contender.
I will say this though, in all honesty, Laramie Tunsil deal comes around, you take it 10 out of 10 times, right?
Yeah, you
have
do,
to. You have
but
to.
but then you have to go and fill that void.
Oh, for sure.
We didn't do that.
Yeah.
We didn't do that. It was a next man in mentality with that.
Well,
they thought
they were with Austin Jackson. To be fair, they thought drafting Austin Jackson was kind of filling that.
And Liam, because Liam was a left tackle at Notre Dame.
Yeah. So they tried. They thought they were, swings and misses, ones and all.
Well, then to rest my case, we have a good one. Keep him.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
To Steve's point too, like every cornerback on the draft board was still available at that chop pick. I don't know, maybe a position you'd like to have.
Yeah. You can never, in my opinion, you can never have too many cornerbacks.
Yeah, I really forget who I did want, but I do remember sitting with my buddies and they were telling me, because we're all Penn State fans. They were like, "Oh, dude, this is great for you. This is great for you." I'm like, "Dude, no, it is not. He has had 22 tackles in his whole college career. How is that great for me?"
Jared Odrick flashbacks, man.
Yeah,
Oh my
it doesn't
God.
mean nothing.
That's the
but
guy I
what
couldn't
we're
remember.
doing. So, that's. I don't want to be bashing Chop too much because hopefully with me bashing him, I'll look like an idiot in 3 years and hopefully he's going to a Pro Bowl. But
well, I will say this.
now
I do think him getting a full off season in a professional weight room with professional training getting off-season coach, like, the going to those off-season programs where players go to and after the season to train. I think we could see a vastly different, like very similar to Jalen Phillips. Now, Jalen Phillips came out of University of Miami, rocked up, right? I mean,
Yeah.
just like chiseled. I mean, it was disgusting.
Yeah.
But I think Chop Robinson can have that sort of transformation, I guess is a word we could use, from what he is now to what he could be. Put on some weight onto his frame. I think he's got plenty of room to put on weight without losing speed. I think there is potential for him. It's just a matter, to Anthony's point, if he could put it all together.
I keep on holding on to that game against the Bills. He's facing Deion Dawkins, and he's looking like a dog out there. And Dawkins is awesome, right?
Mhm.
And Chop was just pushing him around. Like, if he can just learn how to kind of just get the sack, right? Don't just push the guy. Get the sack too. This is a two-phased approach
All
here.
he had to do was put his arm out, right?
All he had to do.
Oh,
He needs to
He
call
would've had
Aaron
two.
Donald and learn that rip. That rip that Aaron Donald does. I haven't seen
Yeah,
him
train
try
with
that
knives,
under
right?
I haven't seen him go under the armpit. Now I'm no offensive lineman. Look, I'm like 160 pounds soaking wet with my steel
He'd
toes
be
on.
better than Rob Jones.
But what I'm saying is, when you see him just hand fighting the whole time, like with some of the, I mean, and it's a defensive tackle I'm talking about compared to an end. Obviously, the position is different. You're still on the line still, but you see Aaron Donald do that rip where he goes up and under the armpit and really just forces the guy out of the way. I think Chop Robinson has that strength and body style to be able to do it, and it just doesn't look like he knows how.
You know who you just like reminded me of with that, like who I would love for him to train with in the offseason because he was awesome at this, and Chop reminds me of him, is Dwight Freeney, man.
Yeah.
Spin
No,
move.
yeah.
I knew you were gonna say right
Oh
when I
man,
said that,
Dwight
the
had
spin move.
Dwight had
Magician.
such a large toolkit of moves. He was
Mhm.
so good. Like, I would just recommend all young defensive ends go train with Dwight Freeney, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, in the spirit of getting letter grades here, through 5 games, and I understand that there's a lot of incompletes here, but in the spirit of giving letter grades, what are you guys giving this draft class thus far?
Do you want us to go player by player or just draft as a whole?
Just draft as a whole.
Okay.
You go to me first?
Yeah, I'll go to you first, Anthony.
Yeah, so I'd like to just go by the first 3 picks. I think if you get any after the 4th round or later, or anything after that is just gravy, right? So if I'm judging it based on Chop and Patrick Paul and Jalen Wright, I would say this is an A.
Okay. Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably leaning more towards a B, right? I think we have a clear, successful player in Jalen Wright that can do a lot of things and have a good career. Chop is TBD, right? With all the talent in the world. Patrick Paul, just on a limited snap count, has looked really great. I think, to Anthony's point, between those 3 players, you feel very comfortable, right? Because the draft is a lottery. So you never know. I mean, we've had Jamarcus Russell pick number 1 overall and been one of the worst picks ever. You've had Brock Purdy be the very last pick. I mean, so you never know, right? I would give this, with all of the other incompletes, probably a B.
Steve?
Right there with him, a B. I mean,
Yeah.
can't really argue too much. It's a good draft. It really is a good draft. And even the people below, I think Taj Washington and Malik Washington, if Tua was healthy, and if I hate going back to these ifs, but if Tua was healthy and the team was playing like we thought they were going to play, I feel like Malik Washington would have maybe almost 200 yards at this point in the season. 5-6 games in, I don't see how that would have been hard. And then Taj Washington unfortunately got hurt, but he's another guy that I think is going to take over for one of them. Two is going to take over for Braxton Berrios, and I think it's going to be. It should have been sooner than later, but I think it's ultimately going to happen by Thanksgiving. I think.
I mean, yeah. Let's not forget Patrick Morris looked like a stud in the preseason.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
So
did, but we haven't seen him yet.
He's
But
injured.
I do think that we have a good second half of that draft. They're all developing players. They're all players that I agree should probably sit and learn. Do the Packers deal with what they do with their quarterbacks? I think that all rookies should almost sit for a year, unless you're that special breed, that Andrew Luck, that Dan Marino. You know what I mean? Like, if you have one of them, obviously you got to play them. But these rookies really should sit. I mean, and I hate it. I can't express how much I hate it when a rookie gets hurt, because then they get passed up on pretty quick. There's nothing more. I mean, there's nothing worse than that. At least if you waited a whole season, you learn the playbook, you got repetitions in with first teams, you got repetitions in with second teams, you have, relationships with these players and coaches, and now you are in for a second season. It's a little easier to kind of gel. Whereas, you get hurt as a rookie, fifth, sixth game, you're kind of out of the loop now. You're just rehabbing. You're away from that first team. You're away from that second team. You're not making these cultural impacts in the locker room anymore. Like these
That's how it used to be, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
rookies would sit for 3 years before they even saw.
George Allen school football.
Yeah.
George Allen hated rookies.
But that's how you create a gelled together team. When you have these rookies going in, they don't know exactly the style of play that we do in the NFL here. You have these veterans probably getting all. I'm sure there's a lot more players hitting themselves in the head rather than picking themselves up. You know what I mean? Like rookie, you always see rookie hazings and not so much anymore since we got in trouble with that. But
of course we did. Of course we did.
I know. I'm a big fan of having these rookies sit, and I believe I see that you guys all agree. But
yeah.
What about you, Keith?
I have a much less rosy view of the draft class. Much less rosy. I'm not a huge fan of Patrick Paul still. He's not a scheme fit for what McDaniel wants to do. He's too big. He's not very nimble. Jalen Wright, good pick, solid pick. You traded a 3rd round pick to get into the 4th round to draft him.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell are you doing? And Chop Robinson, he's raw. He's inexperienced. He doesn't have. As Anthony from the AFC Summit show on Next City Mafia, he said he described Chop Robinson as he's a bag of tools. Great. But if you're using a screwdriver to hammer in a nail, you're not really doing much, are you? Chop Robinson, to this point, is just a raw pass rusher. He's a raw physical talent. What the Dolphins needed after 2 straight drafts, of not having 1st-round picks, not having a 2nd-round pick in the 2022 draft, because they traded away picks for Tyreek Hill, they traded away picks for Bradley Chubb, lost a pick due to the collusion scandal with Tom Brady and Sean Payton. They needed an infusion of young talent. They needed an infusion of young plug-and-play talent. What you have with Patrick Paul is a raw offensive tackle who makes up for it by being one of the oldest rookies in this class. He's 24 years old. Chop Robinson is raw. You needed a plug-and-play offensive lineman in that position. You needed a Graham Barton, a Jackson Powers Johnson, a Cooper Beebe, a guy who you can plug, play, don't worry about it for 10 years. This is not a good class in my estimation. Jalen Wright doesn't save this class in my estimation. And I hate to be that guy that gets on here and I'm all negative.
Johnny should have went first, dude. You're gonna end the show on a sad note here.
Don't leave
everybody
over here. Johnny Raincloud over here, but I wasn't a huge fan of the draft class after it was done. Still not a huge fan of it. Muhammad Kamara still hasn't seen the field. Anthony said it. You can't really count these guys after the 4th round. Anything that those guys give you is a bonus. Well, that's great because those guys haven't given us anything. So, no bonus.
Very few do, man.
Yeah.
Very few do.
But yeah, Chop Robinson may well turn into the second coming of Dwight Freeney. But what the Dolphins needed this year was the second coming of Marshall Yanda. The second coming.
I'll be honest with you though, Keith. How can you assume that you're getting a plug and play 10-year starter? What historical context do you have that in the 1st round you're guaranteed a plug and play starter? Hindsight is a dangerous game to play, man.
But guard is the safest position that you could have gone there. You draft a guard, you're pretty much guaranteed to be a plug and play starter. Whereas Chop Robinson, you knew you were drafting a bag of tools
with insane potential.
I agree with that.
Powers
Yeah.
Johnson was my pick. I had him marked, but he was a center.
Chris Greer went into this draft. Chris Greer went into this draft looking to hit a home run. He was looking to hit a grand slam. He should have been looking for a single or a double. That's what the Dolphins needed in this draft. They needed an infusion of young talent that isn't going to bust out on us. We don't need a Deion Jordan who was a swing for the fences. Or
I'm so pumped because I've never disagreed with you more in my life.
I feel like the screens are split. Like Anthony and I are like, "Hey, it's not bad." And Steve and you are like, "This is horse garbage."
I want my first round pick to be the guy who could be the next Peyton Manning, or the guy who could be the next superstar. I don't want some safeguard in the first round.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you if we had first round picks the last 2 years.
I do too.
Yeah, but you guys also what you guys aren't understanding is that you have to take into account the players we got for those picks. There was no player in this draft. I don't care if it was the first overall pick down to where we picked that was better than Nick Chubb, than Bradley Chubb. Right? There is no player in this draft that's better than Tyreek Hill. Now he's playing like hot garbage right now, but
you're 217. You're also sacrificing cheap, affordable, young talent for older, more expensive, proven talent.
Well, that is an understatement, Keith. You are doing yourself a disjustice if you're saying that those two players are just proven talent.
Well,
those
are
stud stars at their positions.
Yes, they are. Bradley Chubb, not so much. Bradley Chubb's a good defensive end.
I'm going to counter again by saying that the offensive line has been anything but a surefire thing the past 5 years. I mean, that's all they ever talk about during draft day is how the offensive line used to be a surefire thing. You get an offensive tackle in the top 10, they end up playing for you for 12 years or whatever. But we haven't seen that. I mean,
this wasn't a normal offensive line class, though, Anthony. And you look at the way Graham Barton and Cooper Beebe, Jackson Powers Johnson,
again,
look at the way those guys are playing.
But yeah, you're using a 5-game sample in the NFL already. There's no way you could have known that beforehand. Also, again, I don't want to guard at 18. This is boring, and it doesn't help your team as much as you think it does.
Boring wins games.
No, it doesn't. Our running game is already very good. What is a guard going to do for our passing game? Absolutely nothing, right? Boring does not win games. The Kansas City Chiefs are anything but boring.
It's going to make it so that Ed Oliver isn't into his lap the second he drops back.
Yeah. Yeah,
nobody does that.
Nobody
does that.
Man, this is
awesome. First round.
I gotta be honest with you. I absolutely love. I love that there's two of us on this side and two not even lukewarm, polar freaking opposites. This is what this kind of show's about, fellas.
Yeah,
I've been saying it though since the beginning. You need hands in the dirt, and you need to draft them first. I haven't said you need to draft them first, but that's the best way to build a team is to draft them first and having hands in the dirt.
Well, what did they say? What did they say?
Most important position.
Right? Hands in the dirt, Steve. What is Chop Robinson? He's a hand in the dirt.
Not really. He's on 2 feet most of the time.
He's a defensive
end. He's an outside linebacker. He's an outside linebacker.
He's a defensive end.
They're the same. They're the same basic thing. But
yeah, but
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying, Josh. I do, and I see what you're saying, Anthony. I see what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. I don't agree. I didn't like the Chop pick when it happened. I still don't like it. I hope I'm wrong. I hope 3 years from now he turns.
No, I'm kidding. I'm just messing.
I hope I'm wrong. I hope 3 years from now he turns into the next Dwight Freeney. That would be amazing. That would be incredible. But
let's just for a moment, shall we? Go look at the 2-time Super Bowl winning in a row Kansas City Chiefs and see how many offensive linemen they've drafted in the first round. Let's say the past 5 years.
Okay.
Any guesses?
I'm going to say 0.
1.
It's 0.
Wait, they drafted their center, didn't they?
Creed Humphrey's a second-round pick.
Oh, second-round
pick. Yeah. So the past they didn't have one in 2021, so that's a little bit of cheating. But
they're still drafting linemen. We're not even doing.
Yeah, we drafted Patrick Paul.
So are we.
Patrick Paul is round 2.
I don't think Patrick Paul's a scheme fit. And I have a problem with Patrick Paul.
And they're professionals, right? Like Chris Greer has been in the NFL for 30 years or something like that, right? You can hate him all you want, but you can't say that you know more than him about football. And if he thinks that Patrick Paul is going to fit and he works with the team, he works with the coaches, we've seen Hard Knocks enough to know that this is not a GM in a bubble like on draft day right? Like, this isn't the Cleveland Browns GM going, this is my decision, you do your job. Like, these guys work together, and they said to the offensive line coach, how about Patrick Paul? And he said yes. So, that's all you can hope. But I just want to break the mantra that we don't draft offensive linemen, because we have 3 of them on our team right now that we did draft. So taking an offensive lineman in the first round is no guarantee anymore. This isn't in the 80s or the 90s. This is 2024. Teams are not built like that anymore. They're built on speed, and they're built on explosive plays, and they're built on smarts more than anything. Maybe we're not drafting smart
You
players.
need
Maybe
time
that's the
for
problem.
plays,
To an
though,
extent,
and also-
Anthony. This game, it's going to evolve and change before our eyes, over the next 10, 15, 25, 50 years. But this game, at its core, in my opinion, will always be a game that's won and lost in the trenches.
Absolutely.
With how this team is constructed, I could not disagree with you more.
Well,
Sorry,
with how
guys.
this team's constructed, and by my rationale,
Tua has the fastest release under was it 2 point somebody
2.33 seconds. I had it. Yeah.
So why would you spend a first round pick on a big beefy offensive lineman?
It only
because the better defense is
this system.
to it.
This system only works with Tua. There's very few quarterbacks that can perform with a bad offensive line.
Of course, what I'm saying is look at Tua. He was healthy last
because
year.
He
there
has
was no reason to draft an
release.
offensive
line. The only
line.
reason why a bad offensive line works for him.
But it works.
But
it
it's
works
only for him, but it doesn't work for the team. It only works for Tua. And that's where you fail, because Tua is not always going to be there. The second Tua is not there, now the team has failed, because not everybody has that quick release as Tua does. And now you need time, and you don't have it.
Just to add to that,
if your backups were Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, where they could run out of the pocket and create that time, they probably wouldn't be your backup.
All right, guys, we're getting up to an hour and 45 here. We do need to think about calling it soon. So I'm going to give everybody 30 seconds, give me final thoughts on what we're talking about here, and then we're going to sign off for the night, all right? So, Anthony, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, that was my button there. The last thing I wanted to say is that, like, we're talking as if you need an entire offensive line, an entire defensive line of first-round picks. That doesn't exist. It just doesn't. Like, you need your players that you draft to play well in the system that they were drafted to play well in. Maybe our problem is we've had, on defense at least, we've had, 3 different defensive schemes in the past 3 years. The offensive line, they truly don't believe that we need a really good offensive line. Right or wrong, indifferent, whatever you want to say about it. If you guys are setting yourself up for disappointment if you think every first round that Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer are in charge of this team, we're going to draft an offensive lineman, because I can guarantee it's not going to happen. So they're looking for the breakout player. They're looking for the superstar. They're looking for the genie in a bottle, or whatever the heck you want to call it. They hope they get it with Chop. Listen, I don't have a whole lot of confidence in our draft picks because we haven't had great drafts, but I'm still really on team, like, go get that guy who could be a superstar over go get the guard. That's so boring. That's my final.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah, Josh.
And final thought, something else to keep in mind, since I love this. I love draft. Draft talk is drafting is my passion. The draft, I cannot wait. Not that I'm excited for the season.
It's going to be fun.
It's my favorite time of the year, mainly because the Dolphins have sucked for 20 years. So it's the only time I get excited. But I will say this. Also keep in mind some of the draft strategy, okay, that we've employed and over the last couple of years is to make sure we have someone there that can fill the high price ticket item, right? So you have Bradley Chubb, who's leaving. So we draft Chop Robinson. Hopefully he can step in the Jalen Phillips role, because Jalen Phillips role is going to get paid the money essentially, theoretically. I mean, he's injured again, so who knows? But the thought process is there. You have Tyreek Hill on a huge salary, so they pay Jalen Waddle. So to be our number one when Hill leaves. So we gotta, so we draft to fill. You have Jalen Wright, right? Raheem Mostert's leaving, so that means Achane is stepping up. We need somebody to backfill Achane's role, so they draft Jalen Wright. So it seems like now, albeit to Anthony's point, we suck at drafting. So, when we hit, hey, great for us, right? Pat on the back. But there's a rhyme and a reason to why they drafted the players that they did. Patrick Paul, tons of potential, huge person. Look at him compared to Teron Armstead. Pretty similar, right?
Yeah.
Teron Armstead's about to go out the door. Let Patrick Paul learn from him for a year and step into his shoes, hopefully, right? So I'm with Anthony on this, man. I really am.
All right.
Keith, by the way,
like
you
I
didn't
said,
give a grade. You didn't give a grade for your draft.
I'll give him a C. No, I'll give him a C.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
No, the Jalen Wright pick was a hit. I can't knock them for that. I can knock what they gave up to get him, but I can't knock them for drafting Jalen Wright because Jalen Wright has been a hit. Jalen Wright is the reason why we're 2-3 right now and not 1-4.
I love it.
That's a B then for the draft. We have a B draft. What are we all arguing about right now?
Because it's fun.
Yeah. All right, Steve, final thoughts, man.
Yeah, my final thought is switch from a 3-4 to a 4-3. Put Chop at the end instead of on the outside linebacker. Switch it on your depth chart, and I'll stop arguing it. But my final thought is just draft the right player. Just draft the player that's the best player on the board. And it wasn't Chop at the time. He was not the best player on the board.
But if he turns into Jalen Phillips,
what, and gets hurt every other year?
Like a healthy Jalen Phillips, let's say.
Okay, well then that would be sweet. But I would just rather, if your first pick should be more of a game-ready pick than Chop Robinson. I bet you if we didn't pick him, he would have fell pretty far. I don't think a whole lot of teams, for some reason, all the bad teams that stay bad are all the teams that like to gamble. I'm not saying we're a bad team, but we've been stuck in this mediocre position of draft picks for a long time. And when you gamble, it tends to not work out. Whereas Keith's point, when you pick somebody who you know is more of a plug and play player, that's more of the safe pick of the first round. And I still stick with Keith on that, where we just need to start drafting players who in their respective round should be drafted by their respective ready time to play.
All right. I'm sure there's going to be more debates of this nature in future episodes. I think we all struck a chord with all of us. We kind of
We found it.
It was and
we just found our segments for draft season, though. Very clearly, the two of us are on the same page, and the other two are on the same page. The draft season is going to be
amazing content.
Yes, absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, buckle up.